So now getting into, as we're talking about Ruby Dhalla being falsely accused and being kicked off stage because they were afraid of her speaking the truth to power in the liberal leadership race. I want to show people this. So Mark Nixon says, breaking: Stevie O'Brien, former liberal chief of staff, just exposed the truth live on CBC. Liberals kicked Ruby Dhalla out because she was a threat to Mark Carney. They were terrified she ripped him apart and exposed him. This race was never real. Carney was selected, not elected. Again, you're talking about someone that doesn't have any ranking in Canadian politics. Doesn't have any riding, it was not selected by any representation within Canadian politics. Here down nowhere has 3 different citizenships and is now going to be crowned as Justin Trudeau's successor without any sort of notation or any accountability to that. Until kind of the CBC showcase this. Watch.
But Stevie, it seems like Ruby Dhalla, who we are hoping to have on the show maybe tomorrow, is going to go into that debate on Monday and without the translation, and again on Tuesday, and she is going to attack the frontrunner pretty aggressively. Like, she brings a very interesting, based on what she's doing on social media, that is my impression. What kind of a dynamic does it
I certainly
create?
hope that the party finds a legitimate reason to disqualify her candidacy before the debate.
Really?
I hope so. I think that, we've got a series.
I hope so. I hope there's a way we can kick her out, because I mean, we got to find something to track her down, because if we just kick her off stage for no reason, then that would make us look like, anti-democratic shills, and that's what we are. But I don't want to show that to the people after they just stated that, oh, well, she's kind of a menace on social media, and we're afraid that she's going to bring that to the other competitors. Oh, that kind of exposes a lot.
Serious campaign. Canadians are looking for a serious leader. I think that's one of the reasons that Carney is doing very well. I would really hate for us to lose, as a partisan, to lose that momentum because someone's trying to turn the debates into a circus.
That's a tough thing to do. I mean, they've already disqualified.
I'd hate to lose that momentum because, oh my God, someone like Ruby Dhalla might be asking Mark Carney about his background. That's a circus. As opposed to right now. As opposed to what we're dealing with right now. That Justin Trudeau resigned back in January. He's still somehow acting as prime minister. We have no real leadership. And yet this leadership race, this election you're having within the party, is showcasing to not actually be a democratic election. And really is just a entire circus, entire front that Mark Carney can be ushered in, no questions asked. As opposed to the circus we're in right now. They're worried about Ruby Dhalla stirring things up. Wow. So here is another clip from the CBC. This is later on. They interview someone from, I think this is from Brian Mulroney's institution or some sort of political institution. And they're about to drop the ball on why they want to discredit Ruby Dhalla. Because they kind of know exactly who this person is. They know exactly how she's going to play into the field. They know why Canadians adore her so much, because she does speak truth to power. She does question a lot of things within the liberal establishment. She does bring details about, the woke agenda to LGBTQ. Why exactly this is happening? Well, 2 million Canadians a month are lining up at food banks. These are all questions that need to be answered within this party. And here on the CBC, they're going to drop the truth about why they need to silence someone like Ruby Dhalla from the debate stage.
What do you make of this? I mean, this is the second candidate disqualified in a number of weeks. Chandra Arya, now Ruby Dhalla. We're waiting to hear more from her on the specifics of this, but what do you make of this development from the party?
Strangely, I feel a bit relieved. Some of my friends.
Strangely, I feel a little bit relieved. Because democracy gives me a bit of a sore throat. Ugh. I get bad indigestion just thinking about the peasants and getting their point of view. Ugh. Ugh.
Friends, liberal friends talking about the leadership. We found a lot of Ruby Dhalla's social media postings puzzling, to say the least. She was very anti-WEF, which is, based on a conspiracy theory, and you often hear it more on the conservative or
We find Ruby Dhalla's social media a bit puzzling. Why? Because she brought up the WEF. And that to me is a conspiracy. You think that there's, bankers and investors and billionaires that gather together in a certain location somewhere around Davos, Switzerland, and they decide the fate of humanity? Oh, that seems a bit crazy. Seems a bit crazy. Yeah, go online and you can see all the years the WEF has been in operation. It's not crazy. It's not a conspiracy. It's happening. People are well aware about the WEF. People are very well aware how much corruption is going on a global basis. It's not just Canada's corruption. It's not just the country anymore. It's about the globalization that they're using that corruption to abuse Canada to turn it less into a nation and more into an asset in the hands of the billionaire class. That's what's happening right now. And people are well aware of that. That's why they support someone like Ruby Dhalla. But this schmuck here from the Brian Mulroney Institute of Government is stating that's a conspiracy. Pointing out things about the WEF. Oh, that's crazy of her. That's why she had to be kicked off stage. I feel so relieved. I feel so relieved that someone would bring up this conspiracy about bankers getting together and talking with politicians. There's still people I know that don't believe me when I bring it up. There's still people I know that don't believe. You really think that bankers gather together to talk with politicians? What do you think G20 summits are? What do you think G7 summits are? Where they gather together to eat snickerdoodles and talk about Survivor? No. It's about the world's leaders gathering together with the billionaire class to decide the fate of their countries.
the right side. She was pretty vicious in her attacks on Prime Minister Trudeau, on Mark Carney. And, I'm used to that in any leadership race. There are some people that enter it and their intention is for attention. This felt a bit different. And this is something that, we talked about, and whether or not you add fuel to the fire or attention by, retweeting or calling it out. But there was a lot of head scratching going on.
A lot of head scratching.
When Ruby Dhalla was an MP, and there were some problematic issues, and a very well-known McLean story at the time. Not much had been heard from her. And when I scroll through her social media, again, there's the things that I just talked about that, did not seem helpful in terms of, where the Liberal Party is right now after 3 terms, trying to seek a 4th term.
Yeah, it probably isn't helpful to the Liberal Party that's a subservient to the WEF and the billionaire class and the globalization. Remember, Justin Trudeau, back in 2015, declared Canada as a post-nationalist state. Meaning that, hey, we already given up our sovereignty. We're going to usher it towards the billionaire class, the real rulers of society. We're ruled all over by a mafia. So, yeah, it's head scratching. It's concerning. This lady is going to point out obvious things that people already know about. And the people that don't know about this obviously have not picked up a book. Obviously has not actually read into anything. But again, during COVID, we were told not to read into things. Don't do your own research. Don't look into things. Just trust the science. Trust me, brah. Trust me. Like how this guy wants to trust the Liberal Party. This woman with her crazy ideas. Oh, her social media is just amok.
These are the same questions we would have been talking about had there been a leadership debate. But if you scroll further back, there's not much in 2024, 2023 around politics, around Canada politics. Right. There's nothing wrong with being an influencer. Do I want one as my prime minister? Probably not. So there was a lot of things that just didn't seem to add up here. I'm glad that the process has seemed to be rigorous and vigorous, and that this has happened.
So this guy is accusing her as an influencer because she brings up highly trending situations, big news stories that majority of people are looking at and bringing account to that on her social media platform. But this guy's like, I don't want an influencer as my prime minister. No, I just want some yahoo who worked for the Bank of England, who isn't really a Canadian politician whatsoever, just be ushered in unaccountable. I want this guy. I want the same status quo that's screwing over this country, that's screwing over Canadians. Wow. As the late, great George Carlin once said, you don't have choice. You don't have choice. They have owners. They own you. That's what's happening, folks. You don't have options. And even this leadership race is proving that. That even with Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould and the other people that are in bed with the leadership race, they know that Mark Carney's going to get ushered in because that's the favorite. That's the hand-picking, chosen individual to penetrate Trudeau's cabinet. That's going to take over Justin Trudeau's position and usher in this era. He's already announced he's going to use every enactment of the Emergency Powers Act to garner control, to take down Trump, to usher in this green climate change slush fund situation that's going to further diminish Canadian sovereignty and the stability of this nation. Mark Carney is not a fool. Mark Carney is no stranger. He is a psychopath that knows what he's doing. And that is why these people, someone like him on CBC, touting out this argument that, oh, she's an influencer and I want someone who's more sophisticated on social media. They know exactly what they're doing. They're propagandizing you. They're manipulating you to give yourself up, to no longer have the option to just usher in Mark Carney without any accountability whatsoever. So, Democracy Watch, who is the watchdogs that are currently opening up the SNC-Lavalin scandal that we talked about recently, and they pointed out, saying Liberal Party setting leadership contest entry fee at $350,000 undemocratically favors wealthy candidates who are supported by wealthy donors. Much better to have require signing up at a set number of supporters. Also, allowing 14-year-olds to vote is also a bad idea. I didn't know about that policy, but hey, if this is the same party that wants control over children and their body parts, taking up their nips and nuts, then hey, I guess 14-year-olds should make the decision. So Karina Gould was on CTV, and she openly stated right on camera that if she gets elected, or if Mark Carney gets elected, or any of these people get elected, they're going to find a loophole to excuse for not having an actual election. And you think I'm kidding? You think that's a hyperbole, that they're going to cancel out elections? That's something you hear in dictatorship. That's something you hear Zelensky been doing. But now it's happening here in Canada, folks. And here's the verbatim truth right here on CTV's Question Period with Vashi Capellos. Listen to this.
If you win and ultimately do become the next leader of the party, the next prime minister, will you go straight to an election?
Oh, well, I am going to see where the country is at that moment in time, because if we...
So, the host just asked, are you going to move to an election immediately after you choose leader of the Liberal Party? After your internal election, you're going to go for a national election and have a snap election. She says, I don't know where the country's heading at that point. I'm going to wait to find out. I'm going to test the waters. You mean the fact that majority of Canadians have been waiting for election for the past 3 years? Even longer than that, but for the majority of Canadians for the past 3 years. They've been dying for election. Majority of the population, over 70% of this country desperately wants an election immediately. But Karina Gould, I don't know, we're going to see first how things work out. Once we get a leader ushered in, I don't know what the people are thinking. Talk about huge disconnection between between leadership and people. There's more.
We are in the midst of a trade war with the United States. We need to make sure that the entire energy of the government is focused on defending Canada and defending Canadians. So I'm going to want to see where we are on March 10th.
So they just found their way to weasel out of an election and still garner control. This is how they're ultimately destroying democracy of Canada. Because now they have this opportunity of, oh, well, we're in a tariff war situation right now. We can't have an election because we need all government power to deal with this. So now is not the time to elect a leader that's beneficial and actually have democracy and representation of Canadians. Now's not the time because there's a tariff war happening. Might as well just directly blame this on Trump. We can't have an election because Donald Trump. We can't have an election because of America. Concerning the fact that back in World War II, England had democratic elections during wartime. And yet, here in Canada in 2025, they're excusing themselves of having actual democracy and holding an election, having a snap election, so that Canadians can decide to fade their country because, oh, well, there's a tariff war happening. There's a tariff war happening, so we can't have an election. We'll wait and see what happens. Unbelievable. There's more.
Will be an election at some point this year, right? We have a fixed election date in October. So whether that is, an election.
For now. Again, look at who you're dealing with. Look at the people you're dealing with. Look at the fact that while Justin Trudeau was still maintaining power before he resigned, him and Jagmeet Singh, in their coordinated efforts, was going to push back the election day in October. Because we can't have an election day if it falls on an Indian holiday. And the reason they were doing that is because if they extended it even further, whether they get elected or not, no matter who's in power and how many seats they all get pensions. All of them. So if they get kicked out of office and lose their job, lose their seat, because of their incompetency, because of their evilness, because of how sick and sinister they are, well, they get a full pension. Because they pushed back the election date. That is corrupt. That is interfering with elections. That never gets brought to account. But the minute that someone actually represents a little portion of the people that's actually gaining momentum, oh, we got to kick her out. We got to accuse her of foreign interference. And now, Karina Gould saying, well, we can't have elections. We can't have elections. Why? Because the tariff war is happening. It's all Trump. Jesus.
That is called earlier or until then. The decision that I will make as Prime Minister is going to be about defending Canada. If we need to have a massive support program for Canadians because we have hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their job, or we need to ensure businesses can keep their doors open so that when we do win a potential trade war, Canadians have good jobs to go back to, that's the decision that I'm going to make at the time.
So this is how an unruly party, unaccountable party, continues to maintain its overrule against Canada. That they found this little tiny bit of a loophole that, oh, well, hey, I know you guys really, really want democracy. This obviously this woman doesn't know jack squat of the nation when she says, well, we got to find out what the people are about. Even though majority of the country wants a damn election immediately. Oh, well, we can't because the tariff war is happening. So once again, Mark Carney in there, and then he's going to invoke an emergency act, and he's going to do every tyrannicalness to capture the country, to go after someone like Donald Trump. Then maybe afterwards we'll decide, democracy and fate after that. But right now is not the good time. Right now is not a good time. So they're going to prologue this as much as possible to maintain the power, to maintain the control over this country as it's deteriorating because of them. Find people that they pretend to have the solutions to the problems that they have created. That we wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for them. We wouldn't be in this mess if it wasn't for the sinisterness of the Liberal Party, of how they sold us out, how they screwed us time and time and time over again. That's why majority of the country wants a snap election immediately. They want to be done with this. They want this tyrannical force to be reckoned, to be over with. But here, Katrina go on. And here's even Mark Carney. Mark Carney, same thing. Because, hey, he's going to be ushered in unaccountable. He's not going to be elected. So why will we hold elections then if I'm just going to, be Justin Trudeau's successor and continue on this dysfunction and dystopia? As David Crane points out, Karina Gould says tariffs might be a reason not to go to the polls. Now Mark Carney refuses to answer if he will call an election if he wins Liberal leadership. And here's what happened.
Will you call an election if you win? Will you call an election if you win the leadership? Mark, will you call an election if you win?
Doesn't say barely a word until that reporter asked him by name, Mark. And he turns around and says, we'll see. So that shows you the fate of democracy here in Canada. That the people in power that entrench themselves, that are deeply corrupted, this country is so corroded, the parliamentary system is so deeply entrenched in corruption that they know that they're going to lose this. If an election was called, they know that someone like Pierre Poilievre will come in, and they know how popular he is. So they're going to do everything in their power to try to prolong this effort into thwarting against an election. Oh, now's not the time because tariff war. Oh, now's not the time because of this. Oh, now's not the time. Well, now, we have someone like Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland in power. They're just going to invoke an Emergencies Act. They're going to invoke whatever tyrannical force they have in their power and leverage to take control over the country and rule it like a king or a queen, in the case of Chrystia Freeland. But everything's steering in the direction of Mark Carney. Everything's steering the direction of this guy who don't know anything about, we're not allowed to know anything about. All we know is that he has 3 different citizenships. He worked at the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, and he is the evil mastermind behind the corruption within using climate change as an excuse to money laundering into his own financial institutions, his own backings, his own corrupted corporations like Brookfield that are manipulating through the disguise of climate change. And now you know that this is how much they care about democracy. That, hey, we don't care. We're not going to, when an election happens, an election happens. They're barely listening to the public, barely listening, barely representative to anything that's going on right now. And that shows the demise of this country, the complete, utter just collapse of the political system within Canada, and we desperately need an overhaul. Desperately need an overhaul. Now, I don't believe that annexation from America is the proper solution, but I do think that we need some sort of overhaul. If they're going to play these bags of tricks, if they're going to do anything in their back pockets to maintain this power for as long as possible, then Canadians need to gather together and understand this, that we could fight for our country and for our sovereignty, for the notion and protection for all Canadians.